Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us for our second annual Transportation Summit. So our first one was about the same time last year. The theme was bicycle equity for the first one. This year, the theme is policy and action, and we have a really great panel for you. We have with us Councilman Ryan Dorsey, who is councilman of this district here at Morgan. We also have State Delegate Robbyn Lewis, who, because she's carless, she's still in transit. And then we have with us the union rep for the Amalgamated Transit Union, Mr. David, president of the union, Mr. David McClure. We'd like to briefly thank our sponsors, too, who made this event happen. We were sponsored by the School of Architecture and Planning, as well as the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and then we also got sponsorship from the Urban Mobility and Equity Center, which is housed here at Morgan.
Thank you. Thanks, Robbyn. For those who don't know me, I'm Fred Scharment. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Architecture and Planning here, kind of hitching a ride, as it were, with transportation to co-organize this event. And I think that I'm glad that many of our students are here as well, because it's a good reminder that the built environment doesn't stop where the building ends, especially here in cities like Baltimore. So I hope that this is the first of many events that transportation studies and architecture can do together. I want to briefly introduce our moderator. Dr. Karsonya Whitehead is an associate professor in communication and African American studies at Loyola University. She's a prominent book author whose writing has won several national awards. She's also an award-winning teacher in primary education, a 3-time New York Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker, and a frequent contributor to newspapers, including the Baltimore Sun and the Afro here in Baltimore. In addition to all that, I don't know how she does it, she's also familiar to us here at Morgan on a daily basis as the host of Today with Dr. Kaye, a radio show on WEAA that tackles the difficult issues facing Baltimore City and the nation as a whole. So join me in welcoming Dr. Kaye.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here. When I think about issues that are important to the city and about the work that we do, looking and seeking and searching for opportunities to engage, I think is the primary goal of someone who considers themselves to be a concerned resident. I'm happy to see students here, whether you're here for extra credit because it's the end of the semester, or you're here because you're actually concerned about these issues, we welcome you into this space. I often say that if we actually want to change the world, then we should turn our attention to those coming after us and not those who've gone before us. Now, my father would disagree. He keeps thinking that he can change the world. I'm like, Dad, actually, at almost 80, you can sit down. Trust me, you've carried the baton far enough. The goal for us, those who are a little bit over 30, like I am, is to pass the baton along and make sure we move it a little bit farther down the path. That's the goal for tonight. We want to make sure that this issue is being kicked down the road a little bit farther down the path, and are we engaging with it in the correct way? My job here tonight is simply to moderate, to move the conversation forward when we hit any difficult points, to keep us going in the right direction, and hopefully to engage with you enough that you're asking questions, you're looking for and demanding in some cases answers. This is your city. These are your issues, and if we really want Baltimore to change, then the change has to start with us. These are our elected officials. We elected them in office. We expect them to work for us while they're in office. If we are not pleased, we can elect them out of office. The goal is, if they are here doing the job we have called them to do, then they will be doing it for a very long time. That would make us very happy that we're choosing the right people each time. To that end, I'd like to begin by introducing one of my favorite councilmen, and I say that because I live in the 3rd District, and one of the things I know about Ryan Dorsey is he has a deep love for the city. It says a lot that when he was looking to be elected, he knocked on doors. I call it the Ryan Dorsey effect, because there's something very irritating about waking up for me and my family, and we're saying, who's the white guy knocking at the door? I mean, he just kept coming back. I'm like, we're hiding in the house, we're pulling down the blinds. He kept coming back until we answered the door and he introduced himself. And I told my husband, despite how I'm feeling at this moment of somebody waking me up on a Saturday morning and they're not delivering coffee, I'm gonna vote for him. Because to me, to be able to engage with their community from the ground up shows a special love for the work you do. He is a longtime resident of Baltimore City's 3rd District, a lifelong resident, in fact. He was raised in Bel Air Edison, Mayfield neighborhoods. He attended St. Francis of Assisi schools. He graduated from the Peabody Conservatory. He has a bachelor's degree in music composition. I don't know that part of Ryan, because the Ryan that I know walks into spaces filled with people in suits, and Ryan kicks the door open. He brings his own chair in the whole spirit of Shirley Chisholm, and he makes a way at the table for issues that people aren't really talking about. So join me in welcoming Councilman Dorsey to the stage.
Thank you. That was by all means the best introduction I have ever received. Thank you so much. All right, I've got 3 little note cards here. They each say a few words on them. These are some suggested talking points, because I don't really prepare statements, because I'm either okay to just shoot from the hip or read something. If I try to do anywhere in between, it gets really ugly and embarrassing. When I knocked on all those doors, I said one thing kind of over and over and over again. And I had to be taught to say one thing over and over and over again, whatever that may be. I met a guy who had recently won office and took an hour out of his time to meet with me when I was like, I have no experience in politics or government or campaigns or any of that stuff. And he told me the one sentence that he used at every single door, and it rolled off his tongue really easily, and I thought, oh, that's what I've got to get to. And I had no idea the path to that. But what I arrived at is that we will not see better public health, better public education, or better public safety outcomes if we don't address them for what they are, symptoms of deeper problems around livability. And that is where we live, where we work, and how we get between the two. And that we have to address those challenges, the disparities that we face around housing, employment, and transportation for what they are, problems of our own making, through policy that's been allowed to be driven by racism for the city's entire history. And that we can't fix policy-based and policy-rooted problems with programmatic solutions. We must have deliberately anti-racist policy to undo the racism of the policy that exists. And that's how we begin to pave the way for a livable city in which it's reasonable to expect better public education, better public health, and better public safety outcomes. And that's what I delivered to people at their doors after just essentially deciding that I was going to run for office. I don't think that things are what they... Hi, Robbyn. Delegate Lewis. Yeah, just saying generally, things are not what I think they ought to be, and things are not what those around me think they ought to be or could be, given better leadership. And so I decided to run for office because it seemed doable. It seemed achievable that I could actually win a seat on the city council. I didn't know what it would take, but I figured I could figure it out as I went along, and that it was a prerequisite that I just surround myself with smart, hardworking people, and they would help me figure this thing out. So, as Dr. Kaye said, I knocked on a lot of doors, and that was it, just wanting to see better. And it happened that as I was going, okay, I got to get out there, I got to show my face, I got to start doing things, I got to show up to, because I wasn't an activist. A lot of people try to say, Dorsey's just that activist in City Hall with an agenda, and that's really not me. I'm just a guy that has figured out how to get into a lane and stick with it. So I wasn't an activist, I wasn't a community association member or president or anything like that. And I already told you I didn't come from a background in politics, government, or campaigns. I was a guy with a degree in music composition, working for a family business, selling and installing home theater systems. I was hanging TVs on walls for a living, up until 2 days before taking office. And so I decided I needed to get out there and start doing things, and it turned out that there was a bridge being replaced in the district that I wanted to represent, that it was 111 years old, and it was built for a 70-year life expectancy, and we were gonna have another 1 in 100-year chance to make it a really good bridge, and the plans were not for a really good bridge. They were plans for a bridge that was gonna be really unsafe for cyclists and pedestrians. And people had been complaining about these poor designs for a while and not being heard. So I made a little bit more noise than had been made. I also showed up to a thing where folks were talking about kind of brainstorming, hacking solutions to how to better get kids to school. And these two experiences together really ingrained in me very quickly that people, no matter how they need to get from one place to the next, need to be able to get from one place to the next reliably and safely. And that if we can't get a kid, how can we expect to educate a kid that we can't even get to the building? And 40% of city school students are missing more than a month of school every year. And we attribute this most significantly to transportation challenges and to chronic illness like asthma. And this has also a direct relationship to the transportation environment that we have deliberately fabricated in Baltimore City. And so these things started to come together for me as seeming like a critical issue. And the more I looked, there had never been really somebody championing this in the city council. And I knew that I could count on, remember I talked about housing, employment, and transportation, where we live, work, and how we get between the two. I knew that there were people fighting for a $15 hour minimum wage and that I was going to get behind that. I knew that there were people fighting for fair housing and I was going to get behind that, but I didn't know that there was anybody fighting for what the city could do to improve transportation. That we had a lot of people for a long time pushing transportation onto the state officials, saying, hey, the buses don't run on time, blame the MTA. They're state, not city. But I started saying to folks, you know, we own the roads that those buses run on. And there's only one place in the whole country that's increasing bus ridership, and they're doing it through one thing, changing the design of roads to prioritize buses, not to make them equal with cars, to make them prioritized above cars, because they're a more efficient, more sustainable mode of transportation, and that's how we need to be moving people around the city. In the 1950s, Baltimore still had a great streetcar system, and it was moving 50% of the people anywhere in the city, but only making up 3 to 4% of the total traffic volume in the city. It's an incredibly efficient way of moving people around the city, but at the same time, we had a transportation director who said, it's not that I mind Baltimore's streetcars, just that they run on the streets. Because he believed that the streets, if they had not already been made so, really the way of the future was to make them for cars, not people. And if we look all around Baltimore City, we can see what that's done to neighborhoods. They've kept businesses from continuing to be able to thrive. They've kept businesses from wanting to locate in neighborhoods, and they've created gridlock through prioritizing cars. Prioritizing cars never does anything but induce demand for more cars. And so I put forth a complete streets ordinance as kind of one of my first things, like my first big bill. I put it in, and in the meantime, I also increased the fines for parking in bus stops, because we had a lower priority for fining people for parking in bus stops than we had for parking somewhere else. I think that you should pay the same price for getting in the way of somebody who's riding the bus with a wheelchair as you should for somebody parking their car in the middle of Pratt Street. I just think that these modes and these uses these needs are as important for one person as they are for the next, and so we should treat them as such. And now, along with increasing the fine for parking in bike lanes, I think that we're the first city in the country that actually has parity between these modes, cars, buses, and bikes. $250, don't park, it's expensive. So I just kind of briefly said, transportation means access to, I related it to education, right? But I think that that really holds true for everything. An opportunity that you can't get to might as well not exist, right? We see this, there are corollaries to this in the digital divide, right? We see certain communities where broadband access exists and others where broadband access doesn't exist, and we talk about the digital divide. And the same thing exists with transportation. If you don't have a way to get at the resource, then why does it matter to you if it exists or not? And so transportation is posing an extreme barrier to opportunity for people in Baltimore City, and it looks exactly like the racist history of our city. In Baltimore City, 33% of households lack access to a car. I'm really fortunate to represent this 3rd district where violent crime is extremely low, education levels are high, median income levels are high, home ownership rates are high. We have all these great statistical indicators. We're the only city council district in Baltimore without a food desert. But even that's related to transportation. We could lose every single grocery store in the 3rd district and still not develop a food desert because too few people lack access to a car. A food desert even is not defined as whether I live close to a grocery store, but how long it takes most of the people in my community to get to a grocery store. Too few people in the district that I represent can get into their car and drive to Mount Washington or to Towson or to Parkville or wherever they might want to go for their shopping needs. We have all these great statistical indicators about my district. That's an outlier. 33% of households, and I have a very diverse district as well in terms of race. And that's unusual for Baltimore City. 33% of households lack access to a car, but in every single historically redlined black community statistical area in Baltimore, the rate of vehicle non-access is above 50%. There are no other community statistical areas in Baltimore City where the vehicle non-access rate is above 50%. Only ones that have been historically, through government policy, discriminated against, through segregation policies. Further, within every single historically redlined black community statistical area in Baltimore City, there are individual census tracts where the rate of vehicle non-access is above 70 and above 80% in some cases. And there are no other census tracts within Baltimore City that have those rates of vehicle non-access. The real question about equity comes in not just when we see that kind of disparity, but then when we look where our money goes. We still allocate money to build and maintain roads in those neighborhoods and connecting those neighborhoods to others in the city, primarily for the use of a prioritized automobile that, as I said, in some cases 80% of people do not have. Instead of prioritizing the mode of transportation that exists for those 80% of people, or 70% of people, or 50% of people. And so that's really what's at the heart of the justice issue in Complete Streets, which I have been, just running full speed ahead with for the last year. There's a website, BaltimoreCompleteStreets.com, where you can read the policy paper from my office, the bill that we introduced last July, and see the coalition that we've built around that. It's not easy. It's not easy to pass legislation like this. The city just last year wrapped up a 5-year-long process of passing a new comprehensive zoning code for this city. And so this addresses the land use in the city, and Complete Streets is really about addressing the streets in the same way and in a way that is respectful of the land use that is adjacent to it. And it's a big shift for people to look at the city that has prioritized the movement of county commuters in and out of downtown as a direct result of white flight and people who historically worked in Baltimore's downtown moving out of the city, but because they continued to work in large numbers in the city, continue to be able to wield political influence over how the dollars are being spent from the tax base that remained in the city. How we get from continuing to prioritize the needs of people who don't live in Baltimore City to the detriment of the communities that exist here, to one that puts the neighborhoods in Baltimore City first through making them safe and equitable for transportation users of all modes. So that's my thing. I think I hit on all my parts. Over here.
Thank you so much, Councilman Dorsey. I think it's important when you start thinking about who you are that you ask other people. I went out and I asked some people about Delegate Robbyn Lewis. I said, can you tell me about her? I'm not intimately connected with her like I am with Councilman Dorsey, who I call if there's a gas smell. I am that nosy person who has an issue who calls all the time. But I wanted to find out about Delegate Lewis. And what I heard about her is that she is considered and has a reputation for being tenacious and dedicated, hardworking. They told me that she never, ever gives up when there's something that she believes in. I am told that she's able to see national issues through a state and local lens. One person who's known her for quite a while laughed when he said that he sees Delegate Lewis like Sisyphus in the Greek story, where you are pushing a boulder up a hill, and despite the fact it rolls back down, you get back up the next morning and push it up the hill again. That for her, getting Baltimore City and getting Maryland to a place where it needs to be is the first and top priority. Delegate Robbyn Lewis is a state delegate from Maryland's 46th district. She has been in office since January 2017, serves on the House Environment and Transportation Committee. Now, during her first session, she voted for legislation to expand earned sick leave, protect the Affordable Care Act, and increase funding for public schools. What I found most interesting about her bio is she began her career, her international health career, as a Peace Corps volunteer, where she has lived all over the country: Niger, Haiti, Malawi, Thailand, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Mongolia, South Africa, Nigeria, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and she has ended up right here with us in Baltimore's Patterson Park neighborhood to do the hard work for our city. Please join me in welcoming State Delegate Robbyn Lewis.
That was incredibly kind, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Robbyn Lewis. Thank you for your patience. One thing about me you should know: I am the only car-free delegate in the entire Maryland General Assembly. That's one of the reasons why it took me so long to get here today. My last meeting was down in Federal Hill, and if you guys ever get down to Federal Hill, you can imagine the distance to travel between there and here without a car. It takes some creativity, or if you're lucky, some extra resources, which I'm fortunate to have today. Thank you to the organizers, Celeste, Chavis, Fred Scharment, and others who organize this wonderful gathering. I'm honored to be here. I'm amazed this many people want to listen to me talk about transit. This is great. Usually only Ryan will listen to me. Thank you. There's three things I would like you to take away from my remarks. I'll try not to be too long. Please flag me when you start falling asleep. I'll stop talking. Three things I want you to know. First, I want you to know who I am, a little bit about who I am and what I do. Second, I want you to know how I ended up in front of you here, talking about transit like a maniac. And then the third thing I want you to take away is my commitment, my promise to you as fellow citizens of Baltimore and members of a community that we all have a stake in. So those three things. First, the introduction was so nice. Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. I was born in the Midwest. I've lived all over the world. I landed in Baltimore to start my career in international public health. I never meant to stay here. I just fell in love with this place. And it loved me back, so I stuck around. My training in international public health focused on infectious disease prevention. So I've worked in HIV research, cervical cancer prevention research, malaria. I did a little bit of tuberculosis work. I love microbes, and that was the kind of work I wanted to do all over the world, preventing people from getting communicable diseases that are preventable, keeping people healthy, keeping them alive, because I love languages and cultures and being in different places, and I love all kinds of food, and because I'm good at research and applying research findings to real-world settings, international health research was the perfect place for me. I started my education in Chicago, studied all over the world, did my master's in public health, and did the Peace Corps. That set me on my path, landed here at Johns Hopkins University, where I started out doing tuberculosis research in Haiti. That has nothing to do with transit, right? You'd be surprised. What I learned how to do in 20 years of international work was how to organize people to solve big problems. Infectious diseases involve multiple people interacting. You can't isolate a single person and fix a disease outbreak. You've got to have people communicating. You've got to know how relationships interact so that you can interrupt a disease transmission, solve it, contain it. You've got to speak the local language to communicate with people about what risks are. You've got to understand the local landscape, be able to move around, to deliver services. You've got to be able to see the big picture, but focus on individual human beings. That's the kind of work I trained to do. It's really rooted in community organizing, but more than anything, it's rooted in putting human beings first. And that's where we come to transit. I became a state delegate by accident about a year ago. I'd been a community leader, as well as a professional public health person, but a community leader in the Patterson Park neighborhood, where I applied my community organizing skills to make my neighborhood better. If you live in Baltimore, you know every neighborhood needs love. And the way we solve our problems is with love, working together with love. I saw a problem, like a dirty, trashy alley on my block, which was half vacant when I moved there. And I thought, let me get my friends together and let's just clean it up. Next thing you knew, we'd taken over the neighborhood association and started organizing to do bigger projects, bigger cleanups, recycling initiatives, energy conservation projects. We got featured in a PBS documentary for our energy conservation work. And greening, community building through greening, planting massive numbers of trees. So I took that organizing skill, my ability to move around different cultures and speak different languages, my love for where I live, my focus on public health and putting people first, and it made me useful in my own community. I've worked also in health policy. When I got tired of traveling a couple years ago, I found a position working on the Affordable Care Act, on Obamacare. And then next thing you knew, I became a delegate. So that's a little bit about what I do. I serve in the 46th district, which is all of the communities around Baltimore's harbor, a big sort of horseshoe shape. That includes everything from Brooklyn and Curtis Bay, through Cherry Hill, Federal Hill, Locust Point, across Inner Harbor, a little chunk of downtown, Harbor East, Fells Point, Canton, Highlandtown, Graceland Park, all the way out to the county line. 122,000 people are my bosses. Maybe some of you guys live out there. That means I work for you. In this role, my job is to pass legislation. And what's fantastic about that, what's so subversive and perfect and perverse and wonderful about that, is I come to the state legislator position as an activist, as an organizer, as someone trained in public health, which means I put people first. All of my decisions are rooted in the question, does this make human health better? So I'm also car-free, and they don't know what to make of that down in Annapolis. But that's what I would like you to know about me, how I ended up in front of you here. Why transportation? Why transit? One of my experiences as a community leader was when I got radicalized around transit. Anybody here remember the Baltimore Red Line Light Rail project? Anyone here still shedding tears about the Baltimore Red Line? So I keep Kleenex in my bag for that moments when I feel weak thinking about what was stolen from us. Those of you who know are aware that Baltimore was this close to getting back some of what had been taken. Councilman Dorsey talked about our streetcar system. Baltimore City at one time had almost 500 miles of streetcar. You could get from Roland Park to Dundalk by taking a couple of streetcars, and people did it every day to get to work. We were a destination for studying how streetcar systems worked for people all over the country in Europe, and that was stolen from us. We almost got it, the first little glimmering piece of it back with the Red Line. When I learned, as a community leader working on greening and environment and organizing my neighborhood to make it better, when I learned that the Red Line was going to be built and was coming, this was about 2010, I said, sign me up. How do I help make sure this comes to my community and that me and my neighbors get the best out of what's being offered? I was selected to sit on an advisory committee, a community-based advisory committee for the Red Line station near me, which was in Highlandtown. I'm easily radicalized, I think. I'm one of those people who gets super excited. I realized right away that the Red Line was important and that it deserved our attention and our effort. What really radicalized me, though, was when I learned in those advisory group meetings that the Red Line might not get built. As important as it was, it's a 14-mile connector between East and West Baltimore that would have stitched back together the wounded place in our city, that would have stitched back together broken communities and connected people to opportunity, jobs, and employment, that would have made it easy for a lot of us to get around, that would have created an actual transit network in this city. When I realized that it might not get built for lack of political will, I got really mad. I made some phone calls. I asked people to explain to me what I could do to make it happen. What can one person do? You organize. So next thing you knew, I'd created a political action committee to fight for Red Line funding. And with that group, Red Line Now, PAC, we worked for a couple of years and did our part to mobilize citizens across the 14-mile corridor from east to west, something nobody has done and I don't know when, because we're riven through our center by the Jones Falls, disinvestment, alienation, segregation. We reached across that wounded boundary to build a demand for the project. About 1,000 people joined with us. We talked to legislators, city and state and federal level. We did what we could in our free time, me and my friends. We didn't raise a lot of money, but we helped to build a regional coalition with our Purple Line allies down in Montgomery and Prince George's counties. Something else no one had ever done. Just sidebar, we couldn't get anyone from the mayor's office to join us in a collaborative working group with Purple Line folks. We knew that the Red Line might not get built if red and purple didn't stick together. We knew that we needed our city officials to come on board. Down in Montgomery and Prince George's, the county executives were at this meeting. Their DOT directors. We couldn't get anyone from the mayor's office to come, and we knew that was disastrous, so we kept pushing. And we did help to get the 2013 transportation funding bill passed. Just a bunch of activated, crazy, won't take no for an answer citizens. And we'd have the Red Line if Democrats hadn't stayed home in 2014 and let a Republican take over the governor's mansion. Don't get me started. But what that taught me was about political organizing. It taught me how I could use my public health and community organizing skills and my love for the city to take political action. Transportation's all about politics. It's all about power. Let's bring it back, though, to where it really matters, and that's where the people come in. The third thing I want you to know is what I'm working on and what I'll continue working on, and then I'll shut up and we'll have a panel discussion. I am committed to restoring our city to a state of functionality. I don't mean perfection, because perfection is something that humans can only strive for. But I want to help build this city back to a place where everyone who lives here can get to school, work, and entertainment. That no matter where you live, you have access to everything the city has to offer. I'm all about rebuilding the city, healing our wounded places. I believe in healing. I'm all about healing and making us stronger by reconnecting us. What I work on as a member of the Environment and Transportation Committee, I'm pretty new, so they don't always want to listen to me. And they think I'm weird because I don't own a car. But I'm really committed to helping fix our city's transit system. It is the beating heart of our economy. It's the symbol of our connectedness. And it is the driving force for our power. This year, I introduced some bills. Some of them came through. One of them I worked on with Councilman Dorsey and a lot of other activists was a bill to protect our city's newly installed protected bus lanes, our dedicated bus lanes. Some of you guys ride the bus downtown. You've been on the dedicated lanes. Yeah. Did you enjoy yourself? Did you see some room for improvement? One of the problems is that we put the cart before the horse. We built the lanes before we set up a structure to protect them. So I introduced a little bill that I thought would sail through. The idea was to use the technology we have on the buses. MTA explained that we already have onboard bus cameras and that we could use those to take pictures and enforce lane blockages. They're doing this in New York, they're doing it in San Francisco. Those places aren't better than us. We could do it here, I figured. It's a lot harder than that. My bill did get amended, simplified into a state where it really was a study to help MTA look at how to make a dedicated enforcement system work. Sailed through my committee unanimously, then sailed through the entire House of Delegates. 141 people, Democrat and Republican, voted to pass it out of the House, and that was a great moment. You could see a picture on my Twitter page if you want to join in my excitement. Then it got over to the Senate and it died. Actually, it was murdered. But we're going to resuscitate it because what don't we do in Baltimore? We don't give up. I'm going to keep working on initiatives like that because as a state official, I can pass legislation and move policy. I can bring resources to bear. But we have got to have collaboration and communication at the local, city, and state level. And luckily, I want to encourage you guys, we are at an absolutely spectacular, phenomenal moment in Baltimore City. As dark as things sometimes look, there are now, for the first time since I've been here, and I've been here almost 20 years, there are creative, fearless, visionary leaders at every level of our city's culture, in our school system, in our city council, and a lot of the revolutionary new council people who came on board, and Councilman Dorsey's class of council people. They're friends of mine, so they're all radicals. They're awesome. I supported all of them. At the state level, there are those of us who get what it means to live in a city, and we're not afraid to fight for all of that we need. There are people in our universities, and I'm proud to call some of them friends, who are thinking in a visionary way about developing the next generation of technical experts. At every level, in our nonprofits, even in our business community, there are people who understand cities and they're ready to work. So this is a fantastic moment, and we mustn't lose heart. We've got to keep working together and pushing. I will keep doing that, pushing legislation and policy at the state level. And I will never stop working as an activist in my own community and reaching across neighborhood and district boundaries to help others do the same. That's all I think I'll say. They haven't given me the hook yet, but I'm going to take a hint and sit down. Thank you guys for listening. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Delegate Lewis. I want to introduce another voice into the conversation. We have heard from our elected officials and their view for the city and the work that they're doing, but there's always another voice, and it's the voice that actually speaks for the people. I find that elected officials, who I love all the time, tend to speak in a language that sometimes seems to be a little bit disconnected. Because the more you grow, the more you know, and the more you begin to understand the language you need to craft bills and to craft legislation and to get things passed. At the same time, there's some folks who remain on the ground who do a different level of engagement, making sure that the voices of the people are never forgot when they have these type of discussions. And so I want to bring up David McClure. He's the president of the union to give us his perspective and join our conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. McClure.
Good evening. One of the things I want to do, I can only echo what the delegate and city councilman has already said. However, there's a few extra things that I would like to say as well. One of the things that I would say is that I'm really appreciative, first of all, because how dedicated and passionate Councilman Ryan and Delegate Lewis are, along with myself. We look out for the people. We try to speak for the people. And one thing I don't have a problem with is speaking, okay? I want to go back to the Baltimore link, or I should say start with the Baltimore link. Unfortunately, we know that that's not much of a transportation system that has been put out here. As we all know, Delegate Lewis was probably waiting for the Baltimore link to get here. All right, but should I say the Baltimore missing link, because people are not getting where they need to be. If we think back, umpteen years ago, way before we were all thought of, in 1828, I would say, that's when the B&O Railroad started. Baltimore actually started transportation, way back when. Coming forward till today, we are the 9th largest transportation system in the United States. The 9th. Look where we are. We started here, now we up here. And I was reading up on the actual population where we have places like San Francisco, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., places that are more popular than populated than we are. So I have a major concern when we are the ones who actually started with the B&O Railroad. Again, I can only reiterate what was stated there. I had the opportunity to pull up the Baltimore missing link and looking at some of the status report. I have questions about some of the statistics that are in here, okay? Unfortunately, we know that numbers can be manipulated, and it's always done for the most part. There are a lot of people who are trying to get to work, to the doctors, to the grocery stores, and they catch the service, the buses, to get there. But it's not working properly. People who used to catch one bus to get where they need to be now have to catch 2 and 3 and 4 buses. And if you think about it, where you used to be able to pay one fare to catch one bus, now you have to pay 2 or 3 fares or buy an all-day pass. So that's how they were able to get you to purchase an all-day pass. And I'm looking at the format that was laid out with the Baltimore missing link. A lot of people have lost their jobs. They have lost their jobs because they can't get to work on time. That is the most ridiculous thing that's happening to us. And it's going to be you that's going to be able to change this. See, unfortunately, we come and we start arguing and we fuss and hoop and holler for 15 minutes. Then we go back to the corner and say, oh, okay. No, we have to keep this. This got to be something that we continuously do. We have to fight for what we want. And unless you're willing to stand up and fight for it, you're going to continue to receive what you receive. So we're going to have to make changes to what we're looking to get changed. And the only way we can do that, and that's to get people who's going to actually look for our interests. The majority of the people that are voting on whether a bus should come this route or that route, they drive. But yet they're making decisions for you. Why is that? Why is that? Why can't we make our own decision? I've seen Councilman Ryan ride his bike. I've seen Delegate Lewis catch company or the buses. I've seen this. I catch the service sometime myself because I want to know exactly how things are being translated. I want to see it. And the only way I can find out for myself, and that's if, in fact, I go there, ride that service, and find out whether or not it's actually working or not. It's not working, people. It's not working. And you all know this. It is time for us to stand up and speak out against it. And the only reason why things are actually being done somewhat now, the changes, is because it's election year. It is time for you to speak up. It's time for Baltimore to speak up. I host a show called Lunch with Labor. We come on every Tuesday from 12 to 1. And this is things that we talk about. We talk about union issues. We talk about transit issues. But I represent the employees at MTA, which is true. But without you riding this service, we wouldn't have a job. So at what point are you going to speak up and speak loudly? That's what it's time for. Put aside all the other stuff. It is time, because transportation, that's the backbone of America. That's the bloodline and that was going through the towns and the cities and the states. That's what we are. Without transportation, how would you get to work or school or to the hospital, wherever? We need transportation. So let's make it a voice. Let's exercise our right. Let's send a message to these politicians that we're not going to just tolerate anything you want to throw our way. I deal with it day in and day out. And I have to speak on Administrator Kevin Quinn. Because I'm going to tell you one thing I'll say about this gentleman is because of him that he's taken the initiative to try to get something done. He really has. And anyone knows me know that I'll speak what I have to speak. I'm not afraid of anyone, except for my father, because if you look at me and say, son, go home, I'll be terrified. So, but nevertheless, I give it where it's deserved. And Administrator Quinn has actually stepped up and started trying to get things done. He can only go by what the information that is provided to him, and that's what he conveyed to us. But when he gets the wrong information, then we need to speak loudly to him so that way he can speak loudly to the individual that gave him that wrong information and make other arrangements for that individual. Because he's getting the wrong information that he's conveying sometimes. So I don't want to speak loudly too much because I had a whole bunch to say. When I backed up the U-Haul truck, I was told by Fred and Celeste I had to move that truck out the way. So, but I had a lot to say. I guess I'll sit down now and answer any questions. But again, I would like to thank Celeste and Fred and also the narrator too, as well. Thank you.
Okay, so what we will do is, as you have a question, if you could please raise your hand, come to the mic, state your question, and then based upon which person you're asking, or all of them, then I'll pass the mic down. But we welcome you to come to the mic, ask a question, make a comment, not a dissertation, but definitely would welcome your comments in this space. But please feel free to come and join us. Oh, there's a gentleman coming now. Okay. Hello. I think he's cutting it on now, sir.
Okay, is it on now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I heard Councilman Dorsey talking about how low-income neighborhoods that were traditionally African-American neighborhoods were disadvantaged in this reorganization under Baltimore Link. I think it's worth noting that MTA ran this through a transit equity analysis under a regimen that was approved by the Obama administration that doesn't work. Essentially, what transit equity analysis tries to look at is there a bus near where you are and near where you're going? It does not look at how many buses does it take to get from this neighborhood to every place else as compared to another neighborhood compared to every place else. So in the Charles Street corridor, we have some pretty good bus service, especially if you live in Mount Vernon, where service has never been better. But if you live in Sandtown, you might have a bus that doesn't even get you past West Baltimore Station, and then you have to change again, and then you might have to change again twice when you're downtown. They never looked at the number of buses and the travel time in doing the transit equity, and we need to fix that. Thank you.
Sure. We have data research that shows things like commute times, just the same as we have data and research around vehicle non-access. There are a number of different data points that we can look at related to community access to transportation opportunity. And Baltimore, so I mentioned it didn't really go much into complete streets, right? And I talk about this so much I forget who I've said what to, so I'm going to say this again. There's only one place in the country, everywhere in the country, bus ridership is on the decline. Several months ago, I held a hearing in the city council for MTA to kind of report to the council on how things were going with bus link, with Baltimore Link and other things. And David showed up and he talked about some of the challenges that they were facing from their end, and it really fostered a dialogue between MTA and ATU 1300. What was my point? One of the questions that came up was, is bus ridership increasing since we have implemented Baltimore Link? And the answer was like, no, it's basically remained flat. And this was responded to there and in the media as a failure on MTA's part. But in fact, if we look at the nation in general, everywhere else is declining. So if we're staying flat, we're actually doing better than other places. There's only one place in the country that's increasing bus ridership, and they're doing it through one thing: changes to the way the road is designed to prioritize buses and pedestrians and cycling so that more people get into those modes of transportation than into single occupancy vehicles. And so this is what Complete Streets is really about, right? Ensuring that we're making those kind of changes. And what our bill does is what Baltimore is already supposed to be doing. In 2010, Baltimore passed a resolution that says we should be doing things like this, and the Department of Transportation should be giving a report. And then they just basically ignored it because it's toothless. So what we have now before the council is an ordinance that has some teeth to it and gets to be more explicit about the kind of reporting. And so for the first time, we're going to be requiring DOT, Lord willing this bill passes in a form that's not murdered to death, as I believe how Robbyn puts it, is actually our reports have to show who lives in the communities where we're making investment. Demographically, by race, by income, by rate of vehicle non-access, and then also commute times, access to schools, and all these other things. So we're looking and forcing the Department of Transportation to do its part at the city level, looking at these things in a way that past efforts have not necessarily done.
Is there another question on the floor?
Yeah, this question is for Mr. McClure. There was an interesting article written by Daniel Sweeney. Sorry, is this? There we go. There was an interesting article a couple weeks ago from Daniel Sweeney, who was talking about one of the biggest problems with the bus being cut runs, which is when a bus driver doesn't show up for work, and so they have to cut the run. As a union guy, I assume you're pushing for the driver's rights and everything. But where is the mix where we're pushing for driver's rights, but also making sure that we have drivers that are going to show up and make a reliable transportation system?
Well, unfortunately, the problem that we're having is that, again, as I stated before, that misinformation is being presented. And I know that at one point they stated that it was 20% of operators not showing up for work. Well, we don't even have that many operators that are being missing for work. The problem that we're having with that is that we don't have enough operators at all. Okay, they have a lot of buses that they purchased, but we didn't have the operators to actually drive those buses. I can tell you back when the O'Malley administration purchased 100 buses. We didn't have the manpower to actually drive them, but yet it was always stipulated, oh, we're short of manpower, people are not actually coming to work. But here's the problem, and we just somewhat got it fixed. The administration actually would tell us that in order for someone to be paid for a sick day, they had to stay out 3 days to get paid for their very first day. So if I have a headache and I want to come to work, I'm taking off today, but I want to come to work tomorrow, I'm not going to get paid for today because they penalize you for the first 2 days. So if you're going to penalize me and then I'm going to say, well, guess what? If I have to stay out 3 days to get paid for my very first day, now I'm going to stay out and get paid for my 3 days. That's exactly what I intend to do. So that's the problem. And I caught the deputy secretary, I'll put him out there. He was at a hearing at City Council, and what he said was, he made mention of the 20% and all, which is, we know is not totally true. You know, it's not 20% at all. But they're gonna say that because it's easier for someone to come out and say something when no one's gonna follow up and see if in fact that's accurate, right? So we have the people who are not, that they are alleged not coming to work. Well, you only have people that may be sick and they want to come to work, but I have to stay out for the 3 days. However, here's how we fixed it, because the deputy secretary says, well, would you be willing, Mr. President, to sign an agreement to allow them to be paid for their first day? Hello? Why not? That's how it should be anyway. If you give me 12 sick days a year that you say I'm entitled to, but then you penalize me for using it, how fair is that for an operator? How fair would that be for you as a worker, right? So these are the major hurdles that we are finding, and that's why I bring up Administrator Quinn, because it's during his administration that a lot of this is actually being taken care of, right? So when it comes to not showing up for work, not totally true. You have buses that, you have operators that can be there, and even if they sign the book to work overtime, you know, they'll still cut a piece of work. Why cut it? Let that person who wants to work it, let them work it. I've even gone to the administration and said, listen, I would have signed an agreement to allow the part-timers to help out when you're short of manpower. I can't tell you how long ago that's been. We're still talking about it today, and I spoke to the administrator just last week again about it, and he's looking into it. He said he would get back to me, so I'm waiting for him to get back to me. But again, that's all we're waiting on. You know, we're trying to get it. We all have a passion for transportation, okay? It should be one objective, and that's provide a service for the riding public, not the riding private, the riding public. Because we know private industry, they come in and all they look for is profit, right? So that's not what we're here for. We're here to provide a service for all of you. But we need you. We need your voice. We need you to speak up. You know, we had that rally down at the War Memorial Building. I'm telling you, a lot of people showed up. I had folks come to me saying, listen, you got to get it under control. Get what under control? These people coming here, they're voicing their concerns. They're voicing their frustration with the Baltimore missing link. That's what they're doing. And if I had tried to stop that at that time, I was like standing on the hill with a steel ball rolling down, coming toward me. So, sir, it is not accurate, okay? My members, they want to come to work. They do come to work. Yes, you do have some that may be ill, but it's not like they're just wanting to take off just to be taken off, right? So hopefully we'll get this dealt with. We in negotiations for the contract, and that's one of the things that we want to continue on to allow people to be able to take off that one day if something is wrong with them medically, right? So that's what we'll be looking forward to.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for all three. Look at this room. I'm an old guy, okay? I'm not going to be around for that many more years, but people here are going to inherit whatever system we have or whatever system we can plan in the future. So my question to you is, you look at the current, what passes for transportation planning in this metropolitan area, done by the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And there's some things that call themselves plans out there, but they're very vague. They're not meaty. What do you think we can do to, as a region, to plan the kind of transportation, all modes of transportation that we want, public transportation, for the next, let's say, 30 to 40 years? A plan that gives us something to shoot for, that binds the politicians to try and make it become real.
And if we can have each person answer anywhere from a minute to a minute and 30 seconds, so we can get everybody in and get more questions.
Okay. One of the things I would say is bring back the red line. I mean, that's a big part of Baltimore. I mean, not only would it bring jobs, but it would actually get people to and from different corridors. The bus system, the Baltimore Link, I think that we need to really focus on that. And I still, till the day, don't understand why we changed it to a crayon box. The green, the yellow, the gray, and all. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. You know, I think what we need to do is focus in on the transportation system, because a lot of us ride that system. A lot of people that are making decisions for you are driving vehicles. So let's speak, and let's speak loudly. Election is coming, and it's in your hands that can change things for the upcoming future for transportation.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. How many people here are registered to vote? Looking good. I see a couple of you. You're registered to vote here in Baltimore City. If you live here, you're registered to vote here. I saw a couple hands that didn't go up. Celeste, you need to get your students registered. That's actually a great question. Getting back to the question, what can we do to create a smarter, more sustainable, and more equitable transportation system? I think the key word you used, Art, was regional. Right now, our transportation planning is done through a mechanism through the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. We need a regional planning authority. And in places where they have strong, intelligent network systems, they plan regionally. Maryland's population is concentrated between Baltimore, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties. The vast majority of people who live in the state live in the Baltimore metropolitan area. You wouldn't know it, though, if you looked at where transportation dollars got spent. Unfortunately, we need them here in central Maryland, Baltimore, Prince George, Montgomery, but the dollars get diverted to rural areas to build more roads and more highways. When what we need for our future, not just for the economy, but for our environment and our health, is a strong, intelligent, well-planned, equitable, regional transportation plan. It includes restoration of some kind of east-west fixed rail, whether we call it red line or not. What we need is better bus service, and that means frequent and fast. What we need are better pedestrian and bicycle amenities, and we're working on those. We absolutely need complete streets, but for all of this, we need political will, and we need money. One thing I can tell you, I know I've gone over a little bit, but I need you guys to know that thanks to the visionary, fearless leadership you guys now have at the state level, we have a statewide complete streets law. We just secured actually two pieces of legislation, one that creates a statewide complete streets policy that will enable all jurisdictions to undertake complete streets planning. And we also created, I and my colleague Delegate Brooke-Lehrman co-sponsored a bill to ensure funding for localities to get little grant monies to start implementing some complete streets infrastructure. We need policy, we need money, we need will. I think we're at the point where we got that, but we do need a groundswell of demand for regional planning, and you guys can help with that.
I really have to second these notions about will and money. These are these are the two things, right? I try to get little projects happen here and there, and the response I get, first line of response I get every single time is, well, you know, it sounds nice, we need to come up with some money. And then things don't happen. That's how things don't happen, right? Oh, we worry about money. And often I think it's also, again, because we don't have the will to kind of reverse our paradigm around moving cars versus moving people. Other places are creating this will and the money together through political action. I was just in Nashville last week, so the work around Complete Streets that my coalition partners and Dr. Chavis was there with us as a panelist just 2 weeks ago in Nashville for the National Complete Streets Coalition Conference. And Nashville, or Davidson County, has a special election coming up on May 1st to to increase 4 tiny little taxes to create a fund of about $10 billion over about the next 10 years to invest in transportation across Davidson County, which is much like Baltimore City and Baltimore County kind of combined. And so it is really important for us to have a regional view and a regional authority to help shape that vision, but the money has to come from somewhere, and it takes partnership like this. In order to create the fund, simply the place to put the money, it took an act of their state legislature in Nashville in order for Davidson County to have a place legally to put the money for a dedicated purpose, and then it was put back on Davidson County to pass an initiative and the ballot box for people to say, yes, I want my tax dollars dedicated to this. So there are ways that other places are doing it that we're not yet doing it, but we do have the will and the leadership at the state and city level now, I think, to make those various components move forward.
Just real quick, when Councilman Ryan made mention of funding, the sad part about it was the MTA, as everyone knows, the Metro had to be shut down for quite some time for maintenance. And it's because of the noise that we were making about that. So yes, I'm part of the reason why they had to shut it down, because it was unsafe. And it's sad that we had to actually go through a WMATA bill from DC, right? And get $30 million to be added to their bill to be sent to MTA. Why couldn't MTA get their own funding? So again, I think you have to really do your research and find out about certain things so that way you have a bigger voice and go at them in the legislature to make sure that we get the funding that we need. We have major problems right now with the light rail. But that's going to be another conversation.
We have more questions from the floor.
I appreciate, my name is Gabriel Cruz. I'm a faculty here at Morgan. Rode the bus here this morning. I appreciate the spatial justice and social justice aspects of what you're presenting. In fact, in many ways, I think the issues we face are segregation issues expressed through transportation systems. I'm curious if you all might comment on the disparity between the free WEAA bus network serving our downtown core district and the Blink system serving the broader city.
Thank you. Delegate Lewis.
Mr. McClure surely has something.
Yeah, well, don't get me started. I guess one of the things with Veolia, as we know, Veolia, First Transit, what's that other, Transdiv. But Transdiv and Veolia are basically the same. It's just that they changed their name because some issues came about, so they changed their name to try to throw people off. We know that that's a French company. We know that all the money that was made from here actually go to France, where they're putting it into their retirement system, all right? But people here that are driving for them here don't receive a retirement here, which is sad. It's sad. So the money that we spend and millions that we spend from the United States going to France for their retirement system. So we need to start focusing on saying, okay, we're going to start holding our people accountable. Let's not keep talking about it. Let's actually hold them accountable for what they do. But to answer the question on the Veolia, that's a private company. That's a private company. And I don't have anything against the private entities and all, but we know that it's more for profit. So what they're going to do is take that funding that they get and all, and they're going to minimize what they pay the actual worker. They're not getting benefits. They're not receiving health care or vacation time or personal leave days. They don't receive that at all.
Yeah, so I think my concern is that we're providing free bus service for the wealthiest communities in the city and increasing, paid bus service regionally for the people who actually don't have transit choice.
Yeah, I think you've just highlighted an inequity, and that is a free, frequent, high-quality bus service for certain parts of town, and a less well-organized service for everyone else. There's a boutique bus, and then there's the everyman's bus. It's a problem. It's a glaring symbol of inequity. On the one hand, I use the Charm City Circulator, and I'm grateful for it. On the other hand, I know that convenience that I enjoy comes at a humongous cost to my neighbors and friends and compatriots in the city, and I don't think it's worth the cost. I'm not sure what we do about it, but I don't think we necessarily should expand that boutique bus system throughout the city. We need to improve the public service that we have, because that's what our tax dollars pay for. I'm sure you have something to say about it. Oh, next question. Okay, thank you so much.
I have opinions about this.
Yes, and right, and we want to make sure that we have time to have smaller conversations. I know with the look at the time, it is about 12 minutes or so to 7. We end at 7 o'clock. So I'm going to ask people, when you step to the mic with your wonderful questions, if you could please direct it to an individual, because to have every person answer will take a little time. So just tell us who'd like to answer that, or throw it out, and we will have the person who is most qualified or has the strongest opinion, as in Councilman Dorsey's position, to answer it.
Okay, well, how you doing? My name is Aaron Thomas. I'm the vice president here at the IT chapter at Morgan State. And my question is for Mr. Dorsey. I was wondering, how do you think Uber and private companies will affect buses in the future? Do you think they would become to replace them, they would compete with them, or they would step below buses?
Okay, well, I think this is very similar to the Veolia question, right? They are shifting mode share, right, from one place to another. Recent studies show that they're creating congestion, so they're not decreasing congestion in cities. One car that's driven by one person at one time is the same as an Uber, is the same as an autonomous vehicle. They're all creating congestion, so they're contributing to the decline of the bus system. So I think that the more they get used, the less the bus system is going to become reliable. Similar to the Veolia, where the more you put one person here, the less the demand appears here, and so the easier it is for the state to say, well, so nobody's using the bus, why fund it? And so they're definitely contributing to the decline, but it's, a car is a car is a car. It's never ever going to become a sustainable way of moving people around. As I said before, at one time we had a streetcar system that was moving 50% of the people in the city, but it only made up 3 to 4% of the total traffic volume in the city. Now, 2/3 of the total workforce in Baltimore City is coming in from outside of Baltimore City, and 2/3 of the workforce in Baltimore City is going to their jobs in cars with no passengers in them. So it's just an utterly unsustainable thing, and we really have to invest in transit and complete streets that prioritize transit in order to keep us from falling further and further behind.
All right, I have a question that actually brings up a counter argument to our assumptions about the Charm City Circulator being free versus MTA, because if someone is low income or experiencing homelessness, having a free bus that they can use to get to Johns Hopkins Hospital and University of Maryland Medical System is essential. So it's easy on one hand to say, oh, well, it's only serving people in the wealthiest neighborhoods, but at the same time, some of the most vulnerable people in our city rely on that bus to get healthcare and social services and other, essentials to survive. So I guess that's my question for all of you on the panel is, what are your thoughts for how to increase equity for for low income and our homeless population?
Yeah, I have an idea. Quick idea. In some places, they're making public transit free. They've done it in Paris and in other places. Free for everyone. Public dollars should be spent on public goods. So if we were really investing our public dollars to serve people, we would sort of naturally come to a place of equity. I would love to work on legislation that prioritized transit funding so that we're really putting the money where the people are. And if we were doing that, yeah, we could make free transportation, free transit service. That would help everyone. That is an equity issue, you're right. Great observation.
And in my opinion, I think the Baltimore Link was designed to put us in a predicament that we're in right now. Because, like I said, people are unable to catch the service. I have a bus that comes up 25th Street, and guess what? Every day you might have 3 or 4 people riding that one bus. 3 or 4 people every day. I stand out there sometimes just to watch the service come by. So it's pretty messed up.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The largest growing population in this country is seniors, over 60 years old. What can we do as a state to help grow funding that takes care of transportation for seniors and people with disabilities outside of mobility services? Because those mobility services are expensive, and they don't always take care of the people that need those services because they specifically have regulations around their dollars. What can we do for that population?
That's an excellent question. Right now, we used to have the mobility service ourselves as 1,300. In 2013, they actually took it away from us. And then when I came, I got reelected in 2014. We had to fight to try to get some of that back. We only have a small portion. The majority of that service is actually ran by private companies. There's private entities there. So that's where the disconnect comes, because we had, like, as the union, we had 95% on-time ratio for that and all. When it comes to the funding aspect of it, I'll defer that to Delegate Lewis.
I'll always be trying to raise money for transit.
The AARP was the very first signatory supporter in my coalition around Complete Streets, and their publications read like a manual on Complete Streets. And the marriage of the transportation environment and the built livable environment, what we need to do to funding, money will come to communities that are built for sustainability. Sustainability is profitable. Sustainability works for people, and so businesses want to locate there, jobs want to locate there, and people want to live there. So what we really need to be focused on is building dense communities that are livable, walkable, human-scaled, and that are walkable, so that people don't have to relocate from neighborhoods like the ones that I represent, where they've lived for 30 and 40 years, but have always had to rely on getting in their car to go somewhere when they need to do something, and there isn't a place for them to downsize into a smaller living space in order to remain there. So ensuring that we're building those communities for sustainability for people at all ages.
How you doing? My name is Dennis Ayuk. My question would be probably towards the missing link. So you stated earlier that the lack of drivers has an effect on the connection of the transit system to most communities. Do you feel as if the rise in technology and ITS technology, automotive vehicles and automotive transit or autonomous transit will have a higher effect or lower effect on transit equity in communities in the near future?
Are you referencing the rail system, like, getting to and from? But when you look at the bus system now, you're going to always need that because they need to get to certain areas of the city. So even though we have metro and light rail, we still have to have that bus service to get people to their doors. And so I think it's going to be something that we're going to always need. I just have concerns about them trying to privatize it opposed to maintaining it as a public entity, because it's going to always come back. to a public entity. They tried to privatize it once before. It did not work. Unfortunately, it's the people who suffer behind it. And that's why I think I try to speak everywhere I go, loudly as possible, to get people to understand it's got to be you to come out. It's got to be you to speak up about it, because you're the one that ride this service. The people who are actually making the decisions don't ride the service. They don't ride the service. You have to come out and speak, my friend, and I'll give you my card and my number so that way you can make contact me, and I'll put you in. I'll be standing right next to you, speaking out for you and with you.
Are there any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
One comment, not exactly a question, but I first want to thank you for taking your time to be here and update us on your efforts. We really appreciate that, I'm sure. And I think I wanted to offer from my own experience that one of the challenges with increasing ridership may be resolved in enhancing the comfort and amenities of the bus experience itself and riding it, relating to bus stops having benches and shelters, and the quality of the bus itself with its cleanliness and the atmosphere within and around that. So I wanted to just maybe encourage you to keep that in mind and include that as part of the conversation in your efforts. And I would definitely love your card to communicate after.
You notice that MTA actually says that we're going to get you across town fast, right? You know what they did? They eliminated bus stops. So if I don't have to stop everywhere, of course I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to get you across town fast. That's how they misled you. And again, I can't reiterate the fact that we have to speak up. We have to let them know what we want for our transportation system.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Yes, sir. We have one last question coming up. Hello, how are you?
My name is Christopher. So I am an MTA rider. So when it comes to Baltimore Lake, so I'm disappointed like in the weekend service, like before 8 a.m. and after 8 p.m. So buses like before 8 a.m. is running every hour. Like my bus line is the 80. So before 8 a.m. it run every 50. And then after 8 p.m. it run every 50 minutes. So it doesn't run often enough. So like on the weekend, it go from 50 minutes to 15 minutes, and then back to 50 minutes. It just don't make sense. So
wow.
I need better service.
Yeah, well, you know something? No, you're absolutely right. It's unfortunate about the 15 minutes. Remember when they were saying, oh, it's running every 10 minutes, it's running every 15 minutes and all. And I stood out there for an hour and 5 minutes, and it still hadn't come by. So I don't know where the data is coming from, but it's definitely not accurate. And you're absolutely right. Again, in my opinion, they rearranged the system, and it's not working for anyone but no one. You get what I'm saying? So I think, again, we have to speak. We have to speak.
I just have one final comment. I thank Councilman Dorsey, Delegate Lewis, Mr. McClure. They are very passionate about transportation. I may be like most of you. Transportation doesn't matter to me until I have somewhere to go. And then all of a sudden it becomes the main issue when traffic is clogged up, when I can't get a bus if I want to catch the bus. I often wonder if our mayor wasn't being driven around and her security detail, if she had to catch the bus, if that would be a #1 priority other than shake and bake, because it would change everything if you had to get out there. What I want to know, because you keep saying, come, I'll speak with you, I'll stand with you, come, we can do this together. I'd like to hear just from each person here as a closing remark, where can people find out about the next meeting, the next gathering, the next conversation? Because meeting here isn't enough. So if you can kind of give us this as we wrap up, and then we'll say thanks from there.
Well, I mean, just out of my side view here, and I saw Councilman Dorsey, so I'm
Let him give him the mic.
I introduced my Complete Streets ordinance in July of 2017 after 6 months of coalition building and stakeholder outreach. So I put a lot of work in on this even before introducing it to make sure it was amenable to everybody. And I've done a lot of coalition building since. And finally, next Wednesday, 1 week from now, what day is it? Is Wednesday? 1 week from right now, we will be in the City Council chamber finally having the first hearing on this bill, 5 p.m. and Dr. Chavis is going to be there testifying. So that's where you can be at City Hall next Wednesday at 5 p.m. And you can also know where the next thing and the next thing and the next thing is after that if you go to BaltimoreCompleteStreets.com and sign up to get updates on that, because the buses can't go where the cars are in the way, and we have to design our roads to get those cars the hell out of the way.
I think this all comes down to organizing. Transportation, it's all about politics. You want to change transportation, you've got to organize politically. It is true that there are some nodes of energy. Councilman Dorsey has activated one of those nodes around Complete Streets, and that's a place you guys should gravitate to. It's also true that at the community level in some places, for example, in the first council district, Councilman Cohen and others have helped put together a grassroots transit advisory group. It is organically formed, but with a little bit of political support. It brings together people who have concerns about transportation issues, transit issues, and one of the first great successes of the Southeast Transportation Advisory Group was to get vehicle height monitoring cameras on a few arterial corridors in Southeast where gigantic Mack trucks and 18-wheelers are flying through residential streets where they don't belong. And we kicked off the installation of the first vehicle height monitoring cameras on Broning Highway a couple weeks ago. That's what you get when you organize at the grassroots level and engage politically. Next thing you know, you've made a real material change in the experience of people moving around on the streets. I say get involved locally, get involved in the Complete Streets movement, get involved in your own communities. I know a lot of you are students and grad students and you're just trying to figure out where your next bowl of ramen noodles is coming from. But when you have time, get involved in your communities and start organizing.
I can only echo what they were saying already. But I will say this, that yes, if you show up next Wednesday, I'm going to try to be there myself, Ryan, to make sure that I show some support for you there. And that's a good start. That's a good start. That's where we need to be so we can be heard and we get this bill passed. And then we start looking at on a state level with respect to MTA and get them to understand that this bus service is for the public, not for them. They drive their vehicles and all. And guess what? Unfortunately, Mr. Governor, where the TV camera at? Mr. Governor, you get transported wherever you need to go. That's where you go. You can jump in your vehicle and they're going to take you where you need to go. But you have people who are trying to get to work, and guess what? They just lost their job because they can't get to work. There was one young lady that came to a rally, and she said, "Are you going to pay her bills?" I haven't heard you answer yet, sir. Let's try to respond to the young lady.
We want to thank you so much, our organizers of the event. We want to thank all our representatives who came and joined us, and we want to thank you for spending time in conversation with us, and we invite you to come up and to exchange cards and to continue to engage. Thank you.